It's called Doxing.
They start attacking the children.
And when I got doxxed?
Welcome to Teaching While Queer, where we are providing queer folks working in education with a community to feel less alone and unload the burden of identity politics so you can work and live as your authentic self. I'm your host, Brian Stanton. My pronouns are he, they. I am a theater pedagogue and educator in New York City, and I am so pleased to have you here. Please enjoy Teaching While Queer. Today's conversation centers on the stories of educators who have directly been caught in online attacks from conservative groups. We will discuss their experiences and the practical advice they give for anyone who is currently experiencing hateful attacks. I'd like to start by acquainting you with a specific term that you may or may not be familiar with. If you are, please indulge me for a moment. The term itself is called doxing. D-O-X-I-N-G. According to Oxford Dictionary, doxing is the action or process of searching for and publishing private or identifying information about a particular individual on the internet, typically with malicious intent. This behavior has picked up in the past several years, particularly amongst far-leaning conservative organizations in which an entire group of people will post information about a single individual or a small group, which exacerbates the problem and often results in harassment and threats of violence or death. The stories I will be referencing today often touch on doxing. I'd like to start by telling you a story. During season 1 of Teaching While Queer, a lesbian couple from Indiana who are both educators joined me on the podcast. We had an amazing conversation. Within 2 days of the podcast airing, a conservative group found the two individuals, began to harass them online and call their workplace because of the interview. These women were flooded and overwhelmed, and what's worse is that the most of these calls and emails came from out of state. It was an organized attack based on the fact that they were queer educators in a conservative community. They emailed me to ask if I can remove the episode. I did. Initially, I unpublished the episode, but because the link was already passed around, I ultimately deleted the episode. It no longer exists. This amazing conversation we had has been removed. And what's so frustrating to me is that this is a space in which our voices are supposed to never be silenced. And in that moment, because of this situation, these two amazing women were silenced. Doxing is a big deal, and many folks don't know that this happens on the podcast. This is the first time I'm sharing this story publicly. Season 1 also brought us Brittany, who was relatively anonymous on her episode, Season 1, Episode 15. She used her voice and her first name, but we left out identifiers that could tie her back to her specific school and community, because she had already gone through doxing. Brittany is a bisexual English teacher in Texas. She struggled for years with her own identity because she grew up in a conservative Christian household. Brittany, amongst others, served on a panel to review contested books in her school's district's libraries. They were given criteria in which to review the books, and she became the center of doxing for supporting queer literature in schools. The reviews of the books weighed the pros and the cons of the literature and provided objective feedback for the school board to review. Because she supported queer literature, her personal information was shared online and she received calls, emails, messages on social media, and those calling threatened to get her fired. Her story is rough because she was truly standing up for queer students so they can feel seen and represented in schools, but ultimately that was too much. Her advice centers on being aware of your surroundings and the environment in which you're teaching, both physically and philosophically, and being more cautious with your online presence. You can hear her full story on Season 1, Episode 15. Willie Edward Taylor Carver Jr. is a poet and the 2022 Kentucky Teacher of the Year. On Season 2, Episode 5, he advocated for LGBTQ+ students through the creation of the Rainbow Freedom Library, sharing with me that advocacy caused a conservative spotlight to be shined on him. Like Brittany, his information was shared and he was inundated with messages. Willie also became the target of libs of TikTok, which resulted in an increase in calls, emails, and messages on social media. When conservative voices targeting him realized they could not change him or his views, they began to target his students. They found his students, these are teenagers, children, mind you, on social media and began to harass them. Willie shared the unfortunate reality that political and religious ideology, when taken to the extreme, do not differentiate by age, and folks are willing to attack children because they are different. Unfortunately, we have seen this arise in news headlines from other states as well. I'm thinking particularly about school board members for state education organizations that have been caught not only hiring the head of libs of TikTok to work in the education field in their state, but also saying that trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary students are filth. This is so frustrating, and it is getting worse. However, Willie's advice is when it comes to creating safe spaces, and with this current political environment, it's important not to ask specific questions. If a new rule comes out, if a new law is passed, don't ask clarifying questions like, so does this mean I have to remove my rainbow flag? That gives the person who's providing you the information with the out of saying, I'm not sure, but let's just do that just in case. These kinds of questions can lead people into more ideas for oppression, and it would be better to wait until there is clear guidance than to provide options for more oppression. Hear Willie's full story on Season 2, Episode 5. On Season 2, Episode 8, I had the privilege to speak with content creator and educator Linz Amer. They are the creator of Queer Kid Stuff. Because they are so present online, they have dealt with a ton of negative interactions from people who feel the need to spread hate. Queer Kid Stuff was an amazing resource, which I'm happy to say they are bringing back, which provided age-appropriate talking points around gender and sexuality. Oftentimes, those talking points focused on consent, which I think needs to be required education for all young people. Consent and boundaries. Linz has received emails, threats, phone calls, and has taken a step back from social media at various times throughout their experience because of this doxing. Catch their full story on Season 2, Episode 8. The last episode I want to share with you is from Season 2, Episode 25. This educator removed her name, image, and location from the podcast after we had recorded it out of fear that they may be targeted again. She had already dealt with libs of TikTok in the past as a school counselor where she led an elementary school GSA. Their work on campus and in the community brought the spotlight to them after a newsletter with the quirky title, The Gay Agenda, went out. This resulted in calls, emails, and messages to both herself and their school. She received threats that the folks on the phone were going to get her fired and received an increased anxiety over this invasion of privacy. Afterwards, we talked extensively about resources that she thinks are valuable for those who are being doxxed. She shared some options which I've included with others. Catch up with her story on Season 2, Episode 25. I don't want to leave you empty-handed on such a difficult topic. After my conversations with everyone, I compiled a list of resources that might be helpful and some tools for you to consider. The first thing I want to say is to be aware of what information is available about you on the interweb. The interwebs, the World Wide Web, online, whatever you want to call it. I'm a kid of the 90s, so I love interwebs and World Wide Web. By the way, that's what www means for all you young people. You can find out what information is available online by simply Googling yourself. Remember to use variations of your name and your social media handles and any other identifiers that you might go by. Once you know what's out there, you can have it removed for free. It's just kind of a long process. There's some websites you can go to, which I've included in the show notes, for organizations like Epsilon, Oracle, and Axiom. There are also paid subscriptions that will remove your data from the internet, like Delete Me, Canary, and Optory. I've included those links in your show notes as well. However, please note that those are paid subscriptions, so they may not be attainable at the moment. We are living in such turbulent times where in a moment things can turn personal quickly. And I hope this episode has allowed you to connect with other educators who have dealt with online harassment and given you some practical tools if ever you find yourself in this situation. Until next time, thank you for tuning in and continue teaching while queer. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. Connect with fellow queer educators and your favorite guests on our online community at www.teachingwhilequeer.org. New community members receive a free resource focused on creating an inclusive classroom environment. Have a great day.